Welcome to The Leaders Who Care, a podcast powered by Dynamis Group. We are here to give the stage and support to those committed to create a positive and lasting impact, way beyond the profits and margins, the leaders of the world who care for others and serve a bigger purpose. Join us on the journey of creating a better, more caring world. And now to your host, Marian Temelkov.
Hello, everyone. I'm super excited today to welcome a very special guest, Dr. Remi Smolinski. Remi, thank you for making the time and welcome on The Leaders Who Care. It's really an honor to have you. As you know, and many of our followers, we're on a mission to bring together some of the most caring leaders from every corner of the world. So thank you for joining us. Where are you joining us first from? And
Marian, thank you so much for your kind invitation. It's a great honor to be here. I was absolutely delighted when the email popped in my mailbox and had a feeling that I don't deserve to be here because there are so many people that I've met on my path who I would classify as, first of all, leaders and those who care about people, others, and our world more than they care about profits and margins, right, and revenues and profits. So it's absolutely delightful to be here. I'm based in my home office in Hamburg, Germany.
Fantastic, Remi. Well, you had an amazing service in many different directions, but especially the one that you work with young people and help them to really learn about negotiation and really bring a lot of innovations. Some of your students have actually shared a lot about the way you conduct classes, very different than most or traditional teaching. So it is really amazing to hear and learn what you're doing, first of all, because there's so many teachers in that, or trainers, or right now that are looking how to prepare, how to make those classes interactive, how to engage the audience, because one of the most precious currency we have is attention. How do we get this attention in a class for X amount of time that they're engaged and they're fully present? So, but first of all, tell us about your story, Remi, how it all started, and to arrive where you are. I mean, to be a professor, obviously, it's a significant title that for some, obviously, is a dream. For others, maybe not so much because they want to pursue a different career and so forth. But what is your really driver and motivation and story behind that?
Wow, how much time do we have?
Well, good question.
Yes,
maybe
Marian,
milestones. Maybe.
Yes, thank you, Marian, for your great question. Yes, I never planned to be where I am right now, but I consider myself to be very fortunate and happy and lucky person to end up here. If we believe in coincidence, this was probably a series of those that have led me to where we are standing, to this discussion. And I think what drives me especially in terms of my academic activities is helping young individuals, young people, not only young, right? Some of them are seasoned executives, helping them find wiser agreements, and by doing so, resolving, preventing, or managing conflicts that they are bound to encounter. I think it's no secret to anyone that our world, our societies are full of conflicts. And some of them are small, manageable. Some of them are large. Some of them emerge into a violence, right? And the quality of our lives is, to a large extent, determined by our ability, or maybe not so much determined or influenced by our ability to deal with those conflicts. If we look back at our life, we for sure are able easily to name a few conflicts from the recent months, years that we've had with others. Conflicts emerge when two people have different expectations and different preferences with respect to something that they want to do together. Yeah? And therefore, conflicts are ubiquitous. They are everywhere, and they will never cease to reappear. And it's not so much the conflict itself; it's our ability to handle and manage it that has an influence on our well-being, on our not only monetary but also our perception of happiness and luck. Yeah? So what do I mean by this? The ability in terms of the ability to handle conflict, we have many of us have intuitive reactions to how we handle those who think differently about a potential way of going together. Yeah? And what I teach in my classes is how to embrace those differences and how to work out of those differences smart and wise, sustainable agreements that not only allow us to get what we want, yes, but also has a nice in terms of in monetary sense, but also has a nice side effect, and that is it improves the quality of our lives. And if it improves the quality of our lives, it improves also the quality of well-being of the society and of our world. So I like to think that to make a long story short, I like to think that my academic activities have a tiny contribution to making our world a little bit better. Yeah? By embracing those who decide to do their degrees at the institutions I teach at.
Absolutely. I believe that we negotiate every day and multiple times. I mean, even if it's with a friend, even if we go out to a coffee or even the place to eat, it's just a kind of a form of negotiation that we experience. And I'm very inspired and passionate about a topic, really, what makes a great negotiator and what are the things that we can learn and that we can deploy pretty much. I mean, I guess some of them are much more complex, but from your experience, if for our listeners, what are the advices you could give, or the top 3 tips that could make us a better negotiators in our daily lives that can immediately show up for us?
Yes, thank you, Marian, for this question. So basically, you're asking me to summarize a basic negotiation course, which takes about 25 hours, 25 hours into 3 recommendations. Yes,
productivity, trying to combine, yeah.
Right. So I'm afraid that once I do it, right, nobody will be willing to take my course anymore. No, but the ability to summarize is also a measure of intelligence, I guess. Yeah. So let me give it a shot. Yes. One of the things is that we are very often unclear about is what we want. Yeah? So the clarity about our own preferences. Yeah? Meaning. What is important to me? What is the most important to me in a particular conflict situation, in a particular negotiation situation? What is a little bit less important to me, and maybe what are the things that I could live without? Yeah? And not having this clear list of preferences in terms of issues that I expect to encounter in a negotiation is a prerequisite for a wise negotiated outcome. Yeah? So first of all, first step is before we actually end up in a negotiation situation at the negotiating table, before we start the communication process, it's super important to make sure that we know our own preferences. That's the starting point. Second, what very often comes a little bit too short in negotiations that I witness also in our competitions or during our classes on all levels, starting from bachelor's, master's, executive MBAs, and executives themselves, is a perception of negotiation situation as a conflict situation. Meaning, well, we are there to fight. Yeah, and I am the one who's going to win at the end. Yes, that perception leads very often to perceiving our negotiation partners as opponents, yeah, as people who are ill-willed, yeah, who are there to rip us off, who are there to I don't know, take advantage of us, and this is completely unnecessary. The negotiation can be induced by a conflict, but it doesn't have to include it in terms of the way out of it. In other words, a smart way of negotiating is acknowledging each other's preferences as a starting point, rather than trying to convince each other who is more right and more wrong about what we want. Yeah? In other words, very often, once we agree to acknowledge each other's preferences, we are able to look beyond convincing or fighting each other or trying to convince each other who's stronger, who's smarter, who is more eloquent, right? And we start thinking, okay, if this is what I want, if that's what she wants, what is that we can do together to align our preferences so that she gets what she wants and I get what I want, at least when it comes to the most important things that we've listed as our own preferences. So that's the second thing. So perceiving a negotiation or a conflict as an opportunity. And the third one, I think, I'd say empathy. Yeah, the ability to take perspective. That's a decisive factor. That's a decisive factor between those who negotiate, who are able to negotiate to reach wise agreements, and those who just negotiate. The ability to take a perspective, look at the situation from the other party's perspective. Yeah, so what would I think about it if I was them? Doesn't mean agreeing, doesn't mean making unnecessary concessions, right? It's still my preference ordering that is the most important for myself, right? But the ability to incorporate the other person's perspective, yeah, or to embrace the other person's perspective is a key towards transforming a situation from a conflict base into a solution-oriented situation. Yeah?
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. I mean, this is I relate a lot to those, but it's very often that people go into negotiations without necessarily having that clarity. I mean, they may know what they want as the most important, but may not know all the other things that they may compromise, where they can push and go. I mean, more and more in professional business, people may have these skills and practice that on a daily basis. And the question I would ask is, okay, that's helping a lot, but what about if we go at the very best? What makes a good to great? When you go like, okay, this is the basics principles, but you have many people that know this. They're really at the top of their game. And what happens when they come together, when two great negotiators align or sit together?
Yes, together. Thank you for these questions. Together with a graduate student of mine and many other people probably around the world, we spend a lot of time thinking about what does greatness in negotiation mean, right? It's not an easy question. It sounds almost easy. Well, we can answer it trivially. We can say, well, and the great negotiations is the one who is able to achieve great results. Well, okay, yeah, well, it doesn't help us much, right? Because what we want out of this definition is we want to reverse engineer. Yeah? We want to reverse engineer it and so that we can teach our students, so that we can teach the executives to be those great negotiators, right? So this definition, the result-based definition, is it's not super helpful. Yeah, let me put it like this: it's not super helpful. So what we did in our project is we looked at research results that tie certain types of behavior to better negotiated results. Yeah? And we listed 12 negotiation competencies in our model, which which the list, which is probably too long to go through it in a lot of detail, but and this is what the list is what we use in our negotiation competitions, when we evaluate negotiators' performance. So in general, to put it all together, we look for the ability to engineer value, meaning align preferences in options, or put those preferences into options that generate value and create value, and the ability to claim the value for ourselves while managing the relationship with the other person. And this is easier said than done, because when it comes to value claiming, which means getting more for myself, that seems to be our main focus for many people, right? Value creation, it's not so intuitive, but it's something that we can learn. There are various things, various tools, various methods, tactics that we can use to train or to help to create value, to help create value in a negotiation. But what is the most difficult is the relational part. So let's assume that we've created value. Let's assume that I've claimed it. What is important is that my partner, at the end of the day, has a feeling that she wants to do business with me in the future. Because very often negotiations just start and mark a beginning of a relationship, right? Which then is supposed to continue into the future. So it's not only the conditions under which this relationship will persist, but or will continue, but also to what extent do I want to continue this relationship, right? In other words, how fairly I've been treated by others along the way. And the greatest negotiators, I'm summarizing these competencies into meta competencies, right? The greatest negotiators that we know are able to do these three things at the same time. Create value, meaning not leaving any value untapped, unclaimed on the negotiation table, pretty much exhausting the potential of the deal. It's hard to measure in business practice. It's somewhat easier in a context, in a classroom context, but it's still possible. It's still possible. So that's the first thing, the ability to create value. Second is the ability, to claim value for ourselves. Ultimately, at the end of the day, what matters in terms of negotiated outcome is how much I get out of it, right? It doesn't matter how big we very often talk about enlarging the pie, right? It doesn't matter how large the pie is, as long as I have a larger piece or large piece, right? And then the third is exactly the ability to build, create, and manage the relationship with my partner. Build it on trust, build it so that our negotiation partner wants to deal with us in the future. These three things, easier said than done, but that's these are the characteristics of great negotiators.
Fantastic. And I've noticed how important what you meant is that it's not only the outcomes or the conditions you negotiate, which is critical and comes with preparation and having both sides, obviously, to have their strategic objectives. And if they are met, then great. But also you mentioned something very interesting. How do you make them feel about this? So you're saying, okay, it's important to be structured and know what you want and create value, but also it's about how you communicate with them and how you make them feel.
Yes, absolutely. It's super important. There's some research which shows us that it's not only what we say matters in a negotiation. It's also how we say things, right? So basically, we can accept, reject offers, make new offers, write or the counter offers, but how we frame things has an impact on the other party's perception of us as negotiators. So it's how we put our thoughts into words. Matter. What it's the frame that we're using that matters, right? It's it's fairness that we apply along the process that matters, that correlates highly with the other party's satisfaction with the negotiation process, right? So it's many years ago there was somewhere behind me. There was a book published by or written by Howard Reifa under the title "The Art and Science of Negotiation," and it's both. There's a lot of science which flows into it, but it still becomes an art because it involves tiny telltale changes in the behavior, which can magnify into huge, super important results in terms of negotiated outcomes, be it economic outcomes, meaning our monetary well-being, as well as relational outcomes, meaning how sustainable, how strong the bond, the rapport is between the parties, and the relationship between the parties is beyond that negotiation.
Oh, I couldn't really relate more than I just feel this is so important actually, to what you say, how you say it, how do you make them feel, and of course there's many other elements. You mentioned there's of course some specifics in the behavior, that is the art part. If there's one tip you would like to share about the art, what would that be?
Yes, I don't know. I don't know whether our viewers are not too young for this, but when I was a kid, there used to be this very famous TV show called Columbo. Columbo was a detective who was super successful because he was underestimated by his opponents. He was a sort of jedermann, as we would say it in German, right? It looks like nothing in particular, right? Not particularly handsome, not particularly. He was just walking around and sort of asking questions, a little bit clumsy here and there, right? Not a super strong type of a Superman guy, not someone who we would consider a worthy opponent, right? But he was that was a sort of the appearance that he wanted to create, so that people underestimated him, underestimate his smartness. And when they underestimated his smartness, he was the one who was engineering the process, but didn't make the other parties feel that they were a part of his game. So in other words, great negotiators are not typically the front seat drivers. Great negotiators are somewhat more reserved, modest, right? They tend to ask a lot of questions. Many of them are kind of clumsy, intentionally clumsy, but kind in appearance, hard on the problem, kind in appearance, soft on the people. And by combining intelligence and rigor, with a super nice, super kind user interface, as we would call it in software development, right? They are able to create a very comfortable atmosphere for their negotiation partners. That their negotiation partners do not have to keep their guard up. They do not have to protect themselves. They feel very confident and comfortable in the presence of such negotiators to share information, to answer their questions, and so on, right? So I think when I look back at the teams that have won our negotiation competitions in the past, those were exactly the teams. Super smart, with a kind of a user interface, which made others underestimate them, and at the same time like them, made them, and by doing so, made them super efficient in what they did in terms of negotiated outcome, but also a desirable partner for future relationships. Those are the greatest negotiators, at least among those I've been able to interact with in the course of my teaching and competitions.
And no, thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, that example with Colombo actually was fantastic. Some of the listeners are saying I'm old enough to remember. I actually, funny enough, as a child, I've been watching it, so I think you're not that old.
That's great. That's great to feel. I have a feeling that with every additional year of classes, my reference base of my examples is getting more and more detached from my students' background. So it's every now and then it's good to do a sanity check.
It was very interesting what you said. So when people underestimate it, or when they look like they are not worthy opponent, as you said, I like what you just or the way you describe it, because that happens based on perception, and often the perception is on the look. If somebody is not good looking, sharp, smart, or at least on the appearance, then your guard is down. But if somebody shows up smart, good looking, then your guard is up. What is your advice to the good looking and the sharp guys?
I have absolutely no clue. I never had this problem. But there has been also research done on the impact of aesthetics in negotiation, many years ago, and it has an impact. It has an impact.
It looks like we lost you for a moment. It was the most interesting part, and Remi has actually frozen. So let's see if he's going to return. I can't wait to hear more about his vision on that. It's fantastic. I think it's a great topic, and there's so much insights that we can learn from him. I'm right now in the center, so hopefully he'll reappear soon. But until then, let me just move to the side, so I'm actually more aesthetically looking. Otherwise, it was fantastic for the negotiation. If I'm And by the way, to some of the listeners, Sergio, thank you for your comments on that. And here we go. We're back. Hopefully, we'll get some more insights from this.
I am so sorry.
No, I was just saying, in the most important part, you disappeared. So we're just, or most interesting, you're talking about the aesthetics, and what is your advice to the good-looking ones? It seems like there's some technical problems. Let's see.
Am I back?
You are back, Remi.
I am so sorry. I've been having internet connection problems today repeatedly. I'm so sorry that that it happened during our podcast. Yeah.
No, it happens sometimes. We understand. We have some questions as well here from Stoyan, and we wanted to ask you some of them or a couple of them. But yeah, please finish your thought first.
I wish I could remember, right? Oh, yes, for smart people, yes. There are effects of aesthetics in negotiation. Yeah? So indeed, good-looking women tend to have better results while negotiating with men. Yeah? Heterosexual men, right? So that's maybe one of the reasons, and I think it also works the other way. So good-looking men probably also have, if I remember correctly, I would have to check the other one. Yeah, have better achieve better results while negotiating with women, right? So there is not only hope, but a sustainable impact on negotiated outcomes due to aesthetics. Yeah, due to aesthetics. So yes, for those of you guys who look nice, who are handsome, who are pretty, it's much easier for you to get what you want in negotiation.
Thank you. We have a couple of fantastic questions here from Stoyan that we both know. And first one is, how can we create value while leaving the other side happier? And from your experience in the industry, do people actually spend enough time in research and preparation to be able to create maximum value for both sides?
Yes. So lots of questions. Let me start with the second. No, that's probably one of the biggest mistakes, right?
Yeah.
We go into a negotiation. We go into a negotiation not knowing what we want, and that's a huge mistake.
I'm sorry for the listeners. It seems like we have some internet issues, but hopefully we'll get them resolved. Okay. It looks like the internet is not helping us today, but we still will persist, and hopefully we'll get those couple of questions answered. And it's just the topic is so interesting personally, but also I hope for the listeners. So there's so much that we can talk about, and hopefully we'll cover some important points. And also, yeah, thanks, Sergio, for your comment, and also for not giving up as well. Hopefully, we'll be able to have Remi rejoin. I hope we can. Don't worry, it's happening. Look, it's not internet is not a friend today, as Sergio was saying in the comments. So hopefully we'll have some luck to. Let me just show you the question again, because I think
Sure.
you're just showing. And
yes,
yeah,
preparation. Yeah, one of the biggest mistakes is indeed not knowing what we want. Yes, and that leads to agreeing to something that is unattractive to us. So yes, that's and in practice, we typically have a feeling that, well, if we can talk, we can negotiate. Well, it doesn't work like this. Yeah? A prerequisite for greatness or for a good negotiated result is indeed having a clarity about our own preferences. Yes. And then coming back, working our way to the first question, how can we create value while leaving the other side happy? It's by inviting them to the process of value creation, by making them a part of it. Yeah? Instead of, boxing our way through, and making sure it's our preferences that dominate the discussion about solutions. Creating an atmosphere in which the other party feels invited to share their own preferences and participate in the solution development process. Yes, and by this participative type of negotiating, right, based on a bedrock of trust, that we ideally create before it, typically results in negotiated outcomes which do not leave money on the table, which exhaust the potential of a deal, and at the same time makes the participants much more satisfied with the outcome. So to make a long story short, treat each other fairly, change the perception from a negotiated opponent to someone who helps us get what we want, right, by giving us their consent. And in the negotiation process, create an atmosphere in which information sharing is encouraged and appreciated.
No, thank you so much. And this is really important, I think, when you mention, create value and how you make them feel are two important things to bear in mind when you go into negotiations, but also have your strategic objectives well kind of aligned and prepared.
Yes.
As well. So another very interesting question is, how much should your negotiation style be aligned to your own personality type? I love that question. It's just because sometimes do we need to adjust, adapt based on how we look, based on who we are, in order to have to be a great negotiator?
Right. Yes. Stoyan has a long streak of asking spot on questions. Yes. So that's another great one. So what can we? In other words, each of us has certain predispositions, right? It's easier for us to either be more empathetic, or it's easier for us to be more assertive, right? And these. Just to name a few characteristics, right? There are many more. There are others, but just these two help us create or claim value better in negotiations than for others. So, for example, assertiveness, the ability to insist on the acceptance of what I believe is right, what I want, right, my preferences, correlates with value claiming, which means how much I can get at the end for myself. Whereas empathy correlates strongly with the ability to create value, because empathy is exactly considering each other's preferences or my partner's preferences while developing solutions, right? So, and we know, it's no secret, right, that some of us are more empathetic, whereas others are more assertive, which means, and that's the core of Stoyan's question, which means that by our nature, we'll have a stronger tendency to one or the other type of behaviors in negotiation, right? Can we change it? And that's, I think, the other part of this question. Can we change it? And the answer is yes. We can change it, but only to some extent. Okay, it's much easier for someone who is assertive to learn something which is called tactical empathy, than it is for someone who is by nature empathetic to become assertive. It's super difficult. I always give my students an example of my mother. My mom was so empathetic that Probably all moms are like that, but that's the example I can quote best. I can describe the best. She was so empathetic that she first thought about others before she thought about herself. To the extent that it was frustrating for me to observe that she could not push her preferences through in various types of situations. And she couldn't switch it off. And it's regardless of how often we would talk about it, how often we would talk about different potential solutions, right? She couldn't. That's because that's what she was. That's the person she was, right? And I think that's I'm grateful that she was a person. That she was that she was like that, because such people make our world better. It's not those who are it's not the assertive ones that make it better. It's those who are empathetic, that teach us how to care about others. The topic of this podcast, right? But yes, and it's very hard to become assertive for someone who thinks about others in the first place. Yeah? But it's much easier. It's much easier for those who are assertive to incorporate other people's preferences because it's better for them. It becomes a tactical empathy is very rational. It makes sense. And it's very easy to convince someone who is rationally or logically thinking individual who is assertive at the same time to, hey, if you continue like this, your results will be worse. So think about others, so that you can generate better result for yourself. And that works this way. It works much better than the other. But to some extent, to summarize a long answer, to make a long story short, our natural predispositions will always have an impact on our ability to craft agreements. And we can influence them through systematic feedback and training, and move towards the other extreme, or not towards the other, maybe let me rephrase this, and reshape our skill set to become better negotiators.
I love that. And in many ways, you write certain traits and skills that you have as a part of your personality or beliefs. Some of them you may adjust, others may not come authentic. If
Absolutely.
you try to do that. And I think what you're giving an example here is that for some it's easier to do certain parts, for others is not. So maybe you need to, whenever you have a more complex negotiation, you may have a team of negotiators, then you can choose obviously the right members on the team.
Precisely, Marian. This is exactly the reason why in our negotiation competitions, in the negotiation challenge, we invite the participants to compete to negotiate in teams. Because for us as individuals, due to exactly natural predispositions and character traits, it might be easier to do one thing over the other. But if we want to have a high-performing team, high-performing teams rarely consist of people with the same skill set. It's the diversity that makes a team, turns a collection of a group of people into a team, right? Same goes for negotiation. There's lots of research also done on teams and performance of teams in negotiation. And typically it's the diversity in the backgrounds that correlates with the ability to create value.
And if I can add something to it, as I had a question earlier, while we had interruptions, Sergio asked about what we do in Dynamics, and really me personally, well, we've been blessed and privileged to actually go into multiple negotiations with various different leaders from around the world. Some of them are really at the top of large multi-billion organizations, right from the CEO all the way to obviously some of the executive team from US or San Francisco all the way to Tokyo, in fact. And I can see there's so much richness and variety of negotiation styles, as our primary mission and focus is to actually help leaders and companies fulfill their vision by surrounding them with extraordinary teams, by actually hiring extraordinary teams, extraordinary and caring teams. When you add the two, then what makes the difference is, of course, you need extraordinary. I define as people who have the right skill set to do a mission or task or vision that they have already done in some shape or form, or they can perform or they can deliver on. So it's important to have the skills, but also what makes the difference is if they care along the way. I mean, I'm not saying that when you say beyond profit and margins, of course, we love profits. They're super important, and all companies really thrive on that. But what you do with them is actually even more important, and what defines you, whether you really care of making a difference beyond obviously what you generate. And I think when you have that really great combination of great teams, and I relate to that actually, diversity is one of the key factors for a successful company. You know, if you want as a leader, if you want your business, regardless of what size it is, but the bigger it works, even with the bigger the better actually, in many ways, that you could, the larger your company, the more diverse your team is, the more caring you are for them in that aspect, the more likely is actually you could achieve a long-term sustainable growth that you actually going to enjoy being part of.
Yes, Marian, thank you so much. Thank you so much for mentioning this. It seems that we share the underlying belief in people, that ultimately people are more important than margins and revenues. And I find the story of Dan Price super inspiring. Right, it's the person who decided to pay all of his employees at the level of which supposedly beyond which the salaries don't correlate with the perception of luck, right? And this inspiring story, I hope to have him somehow to listen to him somewhat at some point in your podcast. I think
we invite him.
Yes, great. Yes, he's a great guy, and super inspiring story, because when the Corona crisis hit, people didn't leave him. People stayed with him. They resigned, voluntarily from their salary, lowered their own salaries, to help him and help the company they worked at. And those are the inspiring stories which I believe sometimes we need to restore or strengthen our belief in humanity and mankind, right? Also in terms on the management level. It's not dog eat dog, right? That is a very short-sighted view. It's not about profit maximization. We know when we look around, we see what we've done and what it has done to our planet, right? It's about sustainability. It's about finding the balance, between the quality of our life, the quality of our relationships, and the economic well-being. And the only way of doing so is by refocusing on individuals rather than human resources, right? Individuals who have their needs, wants, right? Rather than negotiation opponents, rather than workers, FTEs, right? We tend to depersonalize people who work for us or work at our companies, which I believe is a huge mistake. People are not, or those who treat their employees, their teammates as resources, as means to their own goals, individual goals, at some point end up with high turnover, staff turnover, with low identification rate, and people just come and go, and that's the consequence of it.
If I add on to it, you're absolutely right. Right now is a huge problem with Generation Z. We're seeing that they're refusing, a lot of them, to go into work. They won't change, and it may seem that they want it all, but the question is, why not have it all? Why can't they have all? It's just adapt in a different way, and certain things may work. but it's really that adjustment. And if you really want to make a difference and stand out from the rest, I think you shared something very important, which is, you've seen it in negotiations, is diversify your team, take better care. We also, Dynamics has been privileged to attract one of the greatest leader in neurodiversity, and watch out of how many people of your workforce are neurodiverse. What does it mean? Do they actually have autism? Do they have dyslexia or HDND? How do you take care of them? If the 20% of population is neurodiverse, and that means, what about somebody in their family? It's quite likely that almost half of the world could be somehow affected by that, and you can improve their productivity by making minor adjustments. So I think it is really important to not treat them just as number, but actually as a human being. Every person is a mini universe. And
yes, I remember having a chat with a former colleague of mine, who once told me, hey, I cannot understand our younger colleagues at our company, right? They want to move so fast. They do not want to develop expertise. They have certain expectations, which to me as an individual, right, who is, 10 years older, are completely beyond comprehension. I had to work my way hard, right? Work my way up, and it was a hard way, and I had to go through lots of sacrifices and so on and so on. So therefore, I cannot understand those who want to move faster, who have other goals. And then I thought to myself, right? How about if they are right and your way is not what people nowadays want to go, right? So if we insist our experience, our expectations, instead of listening to what our younger colleagues might want, right, we risk of losing them. And funny enough, this colleague of mine, was left without a team, and he permanently had to rehire new individuals, right? Why? Because these new people, right, did not share his expectations, right, with respect to what work is, what work means, and what I need to do in order to be successful in a particular environment. That's the consequence. Either you listen and adjust, or you don't listen and you lose them.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And just to add some my own observation and from what we've seen, both parties could be right in this case, because he's saying if you don't develop expertise at some point, you'll never be great. I agree. So you need to put in the hard work and really stick with something at some point. But I agree with that party. So just imagine the negotiation, the value creation, and the way I'm seeing it. But then at the same time, if he puts himself in their shoes, they don't know what they want. So the thing is, they need to learn. They need to just try a lot of different things and find out which one they like most. And that depends on a few things: what kind of leader they have, who mentor. So they're young, and they have to experience a lot of different things. That's how they will get to what they really like and they're passionate. And if they get to their passion, then they can be great. So if you understand that and you allow them to try and experiment different things in the company and do different things, and you still might lose some of them, of course, because that what you have may not be suited for them. But the ones who's going to stay and you allow them to them, at least they can make a difference. They can make a huge difference to your well-being, to your company, to everything. So young people do embrace responsibility, but put yourself in their shoes. They have pressure from their parents, from social media. They want to succeed fast. They want to climb this mountain, but they don't know how to get to which mountain. It's the question. So it's this is really, as someone who really invests a lot of my personal passion is to help young people find a purpose-driven career or establish mission-driven companies. And that's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. And you have to.
That's true.
It's just a curiosity, discovery. It takes time. Help. You can accelerate that process. Having individual growth plans. You can, but it just starts with getting to know them first. And be
That's
interested.
correct. And that's exactly what I think that the main theme of this podcast, or the title of this podcast, the leaders who care, right, have in common with negotiation. Yeah? The prerequisite for becoming the leader who cares, yeah, is exactly the same as the prerequisite for becoming a great negotiator. Yeah?
I'm just
That's
showing
the
a question because it's fantastic time what you just touched on. Remy, how would you define a caring leader from your personal professional perspective?
Yes, that's a perfect timing. Yes, thank you so much, Marian, for showing this question, for displaying this question. The prerequisite is the same: is the willingness and the ability to listen. A great leader who cares, caring has certain directionality, yeah, and it cannot be imposed caring. Yeah,
Yeah.
imposed caring never leads to a result to an expected result, especially by the one who is expected to be taken care of. Yeah? So leaders who care are very similar to great negotiators. Those are the leaders who listen and are willing to acknowledge other people's preferences in their overall strategic planning. Yeah? And that's, I think, also a common characteristic of great negotiators. Great negotiators listen. Yeah, I remember one of my former professors said, "There is a rhyme and reason why we have two of those and one of this, one of these." Yes. We
I
should
love
probably
that.
we should probably keep the proportion of usage, yeah, or make it proportional to the frequency, yes, or to the numbers, right? Twice as much of this as compared to that.
And I relate so much to that. Sometimes have you noticed people go in the corridor and say, "How are you?" But they actually don't mean "How are you?" because they're busy to go and do something else. So it's like, "How are you?" Goodbye, goodbye. So my advice to people, like, don't ask "How are you?" unless you have the time to stop and listen and give your
Listen to the
attention.
answer.
Listen to the answer, even if it's for a minute, but just be present. And it's so true. And we, at some point, it all happens that we're on the rush, but maybe you could say, "I'd love to hear how are you and how are you doing," or talk to you, just have something here, but I want to talk to you, something on those lines. I guess it's just what I've noticed sometimes, that if we listen, we discover. And also, when we listen, is very important. Are we defensive about it? Are we creating, our first reaction is also very important to what we listen, Remy. I've noticed that if we react really aggressively or in a defensive way, you might create a culture of people not sharing because they're afraid. And when there's fear, you can deliver some results, but you won't have the joy and may not be sustainable for long term. And
That's precisely the case. Yeah, same. It's the same in business, in leadership, in negotiation, in classroom teaching. Right. So it's not the distance, it's not the fear, yeah, that creates better results, that make leaders more effective, or professors more interesting. Yes, it's the ability to inspire others. Yes, it's the ability to give them what they expect from us in terms of our leadership. And how can it be done? By listening and observing what they want. Yes, what are their needs? What are their expectations? That works really well in leadership, that works really well in academia, although we are supposed to, as professors, right, we are supposed to shine with knowledge and so on, right, with a halo behind us, right, almost.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work like this, right? This era of learning by increasing the distance to students is long gone, and this is not how it works. Yeah? Nowadays, learning processes start with inspiration, starting with giving or serving the content, to our students that is relevant to them. And how do we find out what's relevant? We listen.
Listen, we had some fantastic reviews about you, Remy, and you've organized the international, negotiation competition for young people, and you've done so much in that field. And now this is more question that could help teachers or trainers that really that are working with students or young people and helping them. Tell us about how do you kind of create your interactive sessions? I mean, the feedback we've been having is that you are getting them involved to do things, to make things, and suddenly you're moderating the process, but they didn't even realize that you got them to do what you wanted, in fact. And I know you said listen, but any advice or tips how teachers or really lecturers can make and engage young people, today's generation, in a much more creative way and pleasant and engaging way?
There are two things that come to my mind spontaneously. I'm a big fan of the Platonic Academy. That was the blueprint of the first higher academic institution in the world, in Athens, at the outskirts of Athens. And Platonic Academy was consisted of senior members and junior members, and there were no classes, there was no curriculum, there were no grades, right? It was a permanent dialogue between the more senior individuals with those who just came, with the juniors, right? And why was there a dialogue? Because it gave the juniors the opportunity to ask them interesting questions, and get the information that they needed from those who have gone already a certain way in terms of their path to mastery, right? And I'm very much missing those times in our today's academic institutions, because we turned those Platonic ideas into huge conglomerates of knowledge dissemination, and this is utterly wrong, because that's the best way of replacing us professors with machines, right? It's the only way of keeping our jobs in a certain time perspective, right? Is regaining the ability of becoming an inspiration to young individuals. And how can it be done? Yes, I perceive my role in academia as a servant rather than the ruler. Many of my fellow professors have gone this path, and I've been inspired by some great individuals who, despite their huge knowledge and profound experience, they felt as servants. It was their role to help young people become better, to develop the best version of themselves that they could possibly do. And that's how I perceive my role. That's how I perceive my role. I am there to do two things. One is to help them excel, is to help them become the best version that they can possibly become. Obviously, I teach negotiation, so that focuses on what I do. I focus on negotiation. And the second thing, I'm there to inspire them to look at this topic when I'm gone. A successful academic, a successful instructor, a successful professor is the one who can make his students or her students grab a book when he is gone, not because they fear a bad grade on the exam, but just because they want to. And these are the two, I think, the recommendations that I sort of derived from the early days of academia, from the Platonic Academy, right? Be a servant, answer questions, be there for them. Yes, and second, it's a huge dialogue. It's not you are telling them. It's about you inspiring them, even when you're gone. And the body of knowledge is so much larger than what we can squeeze into a course which has a certain start and an ending, right? So a successful professor is someone who can inspire individuals to become other professors. in a particular topic. That's what I would say. And when I would say mission accomplished, if someone you've taught in the past got so much into a topic that because of you, dear professor, they became professors themselves.
Well, thank you for that. Really, it's a great reminder. Some of those things are basic, and I guess, we might have known, but it's just when you put it in such a way, it's a simplicity. Serve, be there to help them, and be a servant leader. And I think that works the same in companies. If you ask me about what is a great leader in today's, and what people get attracted, if you ask me a question, how could I attract the most talented and really the best talent in the world to join a particular company or particular leader? Well, first they look at who is the leader. They look and say, what is the mission that this leader has in the company? They look at who is the team as well. What is really, who am I going to work with? Because for them, it's also very important. They are already at the top of their game, so they want to know, who am I going to work with? Am I going to learn something? Do I like the mission? Does it make a difference? Is it scalable? They look at things like that. So all those things are really of importance. And if you're a servant leader and if you dare to help them, they'll feel that. That'll make a big difference, because you can't fake that often. You got to be authentic. They can see very quickly through this. So I think what you just said, be there to serve and help others. And I think a successful, great leader is the one who actually helps and develops the people around, and serves and helps them. That when he or she is gone, they do even better than while he or she was there. And he said, like you mentioned, got an interest in a topic and you pursue it even further. And of course, be there to paint the vision and inspire them to say, this is what we're doing, especially not only in the good days, but also in the most difficult times, and be by themselves and encourage them really on that. So I relate so much to that, not only for lecturers and professors and trainers, but also for CEOs. So Remi, it's been fantastic. We can continue. It's a good question you asked me at the beginning, how much time we have. But final question from my end. What is your vision for a better world? What's if you kind of close your eyes and think, hey, what I want to see? What's my positive anticipation of the future?
That's a great question, Marian. Thank you so much for asking this, forcing me into thinking about this. Yes, in fact, I thought about it quite recently, in terms of how can I contribute to this vision, right? What shall I do? What is the best use? What is the best use of my time, right? Time, effort, talent, right? So. I believe in a world in which conflicts turn into constructive solutions. I believe in a world where people can deal with each other in a way so that they can and are willing and are interested in meeting again, in interacting again with each other. I believe in a world in which we perceive others or differences as an invitation to create value together. And I believe in a world in which everyone can has the, let's say, the environment, to become the best version of ourselves. So on very many, I think I've mentioned many aspects of the changes which I would like to be a part of. Right, I haven't mentioned sustainability. It's kind of beyond of what we've discussed, but yes, great leaders also care about the environment, not only the people around, but also the nature that surrounds us, right? So yes, when we put it all together, I think the best use of my time is to help young people interact with each other in a way so that each of those interactions creates more abundance, more value for their according to their preferences, the set of two preferences, right? So, where conflict is an invitation, right, or conflicts that adjust are invitations to turn it into constructive solutions, right? It's okay that we disagree, absolutely fine, but it can ruin relationships or it can cement them, and I believe on our way there, on the best contribution that we can that maybe the small contribution I could bring towards this vision is by helping people turn conflicts into value creation opportunities, and that's I think the best vision that I can imagine, right? It's not you are different and therefore you are different than I, and therefore I am smarter than you, right? It's more, hey, you are different, I am different. Let's think how we can combine it together to give each other what we want the most. Yeah? So yes, leaders who care are the ones who are interested in becoming the best versions of themselves and helping others to do likewise.
Fantastic. Well summarized. Thank you so much, Remi. I really honor the work you do, and thank you for your time today. And thanks to everyone that was part of the live podcast, and for your patience as we had some internet challenges. But once again, thank you, and take care. God bless.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a great pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Remi.